the next thing I want to now look into is how to actually determine fair property value. Okay, so this is not the official valuation method, but this is a couple of methods that property investors can use very, very quickly to determine fair value of a commercial property. Okay, excuse me. Okay, so the first one is the cap rate method. Okay, so we explained what cap rate meant. So as an example, if you're trying to determine value of property, first of all, you look at what is the rental income of the property. So let's say the rental income of the property is $100,000 net, and we've determined that the cap rate of the property is 5%. Then if it's a tenanted investment, then the value of the property will be $100,000 divided by 5%, which equates to $2 million. So this particular scenario, this property's value is probably around $2 million. Okay, so what if the property is vacant? How do you then work out what the fair value of the property is? Because you need to account for vacancy rates, incentives, and this and that. So a good way to look at it is figure out or estimate, what is the expected vacancy period. So let's say this property will likely be vacant for 6 months before you can secure a tenant. And the expected incentive, to secure a tenant is 6 months. Okay, so your vacancy rate is 6 months and your expected incentive is 6 months. That's 12 months worth of rent. So to determine the a fair value of the property, you would do the cap rate calculation, assuming the property is fully let at $100,000 per annum, divided by the cap rate, which equates to $2 million, minus what is your expected cost to rent the property out, so which is $100,000. So the property value, the fair value of the property, is more likely to be $1.9 million, because you're taking out the potential vacancy and incentive. Okay, the second method of determining value is the comparative sale method. This is basically just comparing what is the average price per square meter achieved in the market, and you then compare that to your property. Okay, so let's say the property size is 1,000 square meters, and we've determined that the average price per square meter of comparable sales is somewhere between $1,800 to $2,000 per square meter. So then the value of the property is simply 1,000 square meters times 1,800 to 2,000, which equates to somewhere between $1.8 million to $2 million. Okay, so pretty straightforward. Now, please note that in a perfect world, the cap rate and the comparative sale method should actually match up. So in a perfect world, you should conclude at the same dollar amount. But sometimes it doesn't. Okay, sometimes it doesn't match up. So therefore, you may need to factor other considerations as well. So I'll give you a quick example here. This is something that occurs quite often. So let's say the property is under rented, okay, because the current landlord is a nice guy and has never increased the rent. But we know that the market rent is $100,000, but the tenant is only paying $70,000 at the moment. So in order for us to calculate the cap rate, calculate the value using the cap rate method, then it equates to $70,000 divided by 5% cap rate, which equates to $1.4 million. Obviously, there's a huge gap between $1.4 to $1.8 million. Okay, so what's actually the fair value of the property? Like, what should you, as the investor, actually pay for it? So you have to now start factoring other considerations. Okay, so for example, as an investor, that this property might actually be worth more if it's vacant, because the current tenant in place is actually pulling down the value because they're not paying a lot of rent. However, you've noticed that their lease actually expires in 12 months' time. So which means in 12 months' time, you can do a market review, or you can replace the tenant and bring the rent back up to, what the market rent is of $100,000. So you might say to yourself, what are my opportunity costs? Well, maybe I'll pay $1.6 million for the property because I know the tenant's going to move out in 12 months and the property will probably worth somewhere between $1.8 to $2 million. So I'm still making a bit of money. Okay, so this is just an example. Obviously, there are other factors to consider, but in a perfect world, the comparative sales method and the cap rate method should match up.